Audio Jungle. Audio Jungle.
Hi, welcome to Prayers Radio. We're at show 13, and oh my gosh, we have the most wonderful person in the world. I can say that because I've known him for almost 20 years. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but I've known him for a long time. I'm Reverend Rich, and this is Reverend Paul. And this is Dr. Reverend Jim Turrell. Say hi.
There I am. No, that's done.
So today we have a wonderful show, of course, we always do. And what the wonderful thing is we have today is Reverend Jim is from ocspiritualcenter.com, which is very important to put out. He has a wonderful service that's live, and show number 9 and show 5. I think actually Paul, is it every show that I do this where I say Reverend Jim is on at ocspiritualcenter.com. If you want to see live folks, come and visit us. I think it's like every show, right?
Yeah, and then we get to see him finally.
All right.
Finally.
And he's live. He's, yeah, it's do the cat thing where you scratch the window. Are you there, Jim? So let me read a little introduction on him. We've already pointed his site out. He's an author of many different books, which I'll put a bunch of those inside of the show notes. But one of the most recent ones that he's doing is called Jesus Under the Hood. And I invite you to take a look at that. See, he's pointing that over there. It's very important. And he also has J. Turrell at substack.com. Is that right?
drjimturrell.substack.com.
I stand corrected.
drjimturrell.substack.com.
And he does an offering every single week. You want to check it out. It's something that's very important to check out and see. He's been a reverend for, and I thought it was 40 years, but it's 44 years? 43 years. Oh my God, we could only be so blessed.
Can you see the white hair up here? I used to have dark hair.
That ain't blonde, right?
No, that's silver. Let's not call it blonde. Let's call it what it is.
That's it. One of the things we do on Prayers Radio, just for our new audience, is that we go over and we focus directly on what works with prayer. And that's what this whole show is about. It's short for those of you that are just jumping in here. What is important to take away from this whole thing is that we ask people the questions that we want to know, especially from reverends that have been doing this for a while, like you. So Paul, go. We're going to do what's it? Introduction. Invocation. Go ahead, Jim. What we want to do is we want to hear Jim's favorite invocation that's short.
Okay, well, before I do this, I was given a talk this last Sunday, and I changed "and so it is" to "Kawabunga." So I think God's a surfer; that He appreciates that. Anyway, here you join me in knowing that the power of love is the only power there is, and that it energizes everything. Every aspect in your life is powered by love, and every opportunity that you have is expressed in love. So irrespective of how you experience it, love knows how it wants to experience it and how it seeks to express it for you. So I join together with that expression. And I know that there's a movement of love in this show today, so that the words that we speak can help everybody achieve a greater connection to that which we know is the truth. And as I say, thank you, God, for that. And the success of this show, I release the word and so it is. Amen.
And so it is.
So it is.
Okay.
I want to say hi to our Twitch audience, our Rumble audience, our YouTube audience, and all the audiences out there. Thank you for being here with us, because I can see some of you. Reverend Paul, would you like to begin questions with Jim? We focused mainly directly on the questions that we have. If not, I can start.
Yeah, I'll go. So, Reverend Jim, this is Prayers Radio, and so we get to the guts of prayer. What is prayer? We kind of put out all the other stuff, but prayer is what we do in Science of Mind. So a couple questions for you. What tangible results have you seen personally from prayer?
Tangible results? my whole life
Demonstrations.
is a tangible result of prayer, because whether you know it or not, you're praying, because whatever you believe, that's the prayer you're saying, whether or not you know it or not consciously. So if you say, I don't want no more trouble, I don't want to be poor, blah, blah, blah. God doesn't hear don't. God hears whatever what word is. He doesn't hear it negative. So consequently, whatever you believe, that's your prayer. And consciously, if we decide to change our minds about who we are, then we consciously enter into spiritual mind treatment, which is we consciously decide to change our minds and to think something different. And now we demonstrate a life that's different. So, and what have I manifested? When I got into this philosophy 43 years ago, or no, it was longer than that, and I was teaching in high school, and I told this little story yesterday, and how prayer works. And as I was studying this philosophy, and I wasn't even thinking about becoming a minister. And I was teaching music at San Clemente High School, and I was also teaching American cultures. In this class, we had 100 students, and I was one of 3 teachers, and I was doing fine arts. And so I was teaching kids things like folk dancing, American folk dancing that came ethnically over from different countries. So we were doing this thing on Greek folk dancing, and we're dancing around in the foyer of this auditorium, and there's this kid running towards the door, and he gets to the door and he bangs on the door, and he opens the door and he says, "I'm a Greek foreign exchange student. You don't know what you're doing."
And that right there is a manifestation.
That's a demonstration. So I've had stuff like that happen all my life. Somebody shows up, something different happens that manifests a thing that I could not possibly have planned. And that's the greatest aspect of prayer. I didn't plan on the outcome. God created it for me.
So I brought the hook today in case because all reverends love to talk, especially me. And Paul, Paul will talk his head off, but we want to stay focused directly on prayer. But that's a demonstration like you never heard before. Greek student, jeez.
I'm foreign exchange student, and I was doing Greek folk dancing, and the guys were having to hold hands with the guys, and that was a problem for them. He came in and he just changed the whole consciousness of the room, and that's a demonstration. Something happens and it changes the consciousness of the entire experience. That's what a demonstration is.
That's how you stay grounded in prayer, or how do you stay grounded in prayer every day? I mean, Reverend Paul and I talked about this before. Is that we ground ourselves every single day, and every single minute. Actually, I said, "Well, how often do you do prayer?" And he says, "Well, I never stop." Do you do that, or how do you stay grounded?
You're right about it. Prayer never stops, because I just said your belief is your prayer. Whether you say it consciously or you believing it subconsciously, whatever you believe manifests. And so the prayer is the opportunity to say it with what you want to experience. And that's when you say, I unify with this power, and I declare this to be the truth of who I am, and I remove any other thought from my being and entertain the principle itself, and so on and so on. So you're changing your mind. Change your mind, change your life.
So, Dr. Jim, what do you do when you have a challenge in prayer? How do you work through the challenge of staying grounded?
I'm thinking. You know what I think? I think the only thing I can tell you is I'm in a constant state of gratitude. Gratitude is constantly. I'm thanking God for everything I have, even the challenges that I have. I thank God for that too. And so my concept is, I say I love God, and I love who I am, and I love the life that God gave me to live. Now, that's taken a while to get there. So for a lot of people, they go in and out of that consciousness. And like I said before, what they believe, that's the first thing you learn in this philosophy. What you believe, you manifest. And when you finally change your mind about what you believe, then you start manifesting different things. But something happens in between, and that's growth and maturation.
Go ahead and continue on the questions on that. I'm just checking on our online folks right now.
Okay.
So Ernest Holmes has a good quote about the answer to the prayer is in the prayer when it is prayed, and the answer to the prayer is identical to the prayer. Do you find that in your life when you pray into the law of mind? Because we don't pray to God, we pray into the law, and the law always says yes, and God is the feeling behind that.
Well, God is just a name that we call the power of universal intelligence. And I don't attach a personality to the idea of the name, and some people do, but I don't. And so, consequently, I'm in a constant state of prayer. If the fact is that I'm constantly paying attention to what I'm thinking, but I'm also paying attention to what I want to experience in my life. And I'm saying, God, this is what I seek. This is what I want to know. And it keeps manifesting. But something else happens. There's always a beginning, a middle, and an end to prayer. There's a complete demonstration. But in the manifestation of that, we have to grow into the opportunity so it can express through us. Because a lot of times we don't have the growth yet together. We don't have the maturation to receive it. But then all of a sudden we do. And that's when I say to people, your life goes like this. It just opens up.
And
That's
do you recall oh, go ahead, Rich.
I was going to say that's that aha moment when you realize that, oh my gosh, this is working.
Sure. Well, it is. And then sometimes it takes a while for you to grow into it. You know, you've got to maturate through all your beliefs that are a part of your subconscious history. And, you know, we all know that the subconscious mind, it contains everything we've ever experienced in our life. And most of it is emotional. It's not that we remember the details, but we never forget how we felt when something happened. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people have this insecurity about themselves until they finally realize that insecurity is just a memory that keeps popping up because we aren't there yet in a maturation way, in an intellectual way, in a spiritual way. But we're getting there. And so we unfold just like the lotus does. Life is a constant unfolding forever. And you never arrive. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Reverend Paul. And you had a question for it, and I interrupted you. So.
Oh, yeah. I was wondering if you can recall your own tipping point in prayer when you realized this is actually you.
Yeah, I talk about this experience. That's one of many experiences. But about 1976, when I was about 4 years into this philosophy, just going to church, and I was up at UCLA Conference Center at a conference, and we spent the whole day in small groups talking to each other about different things. And I just was feeling so connected to myself. And I went out in the meadow in front of this lodge, and I held my hands out like this, and I looked up at the stars, I looked at the trees, and I couldn't see a difference between that and who I was. I was absolutely one. And that's the first time I ever experienced that, this oneness of life. And it profoundly changed my point of view.
Oh, that gave me goosebumps just hearing it.
Yeah. Well, it gave me goosebumps experiencing it. And what I love is I'm still experiencing it from time to time where I feel that oneness, that unity of being. And there's just such a sense of calm and joy. And I don't know how else to describe it. It's a calm joy that just fills me up with gratitude. You know, I'm really thankful for it all. Even the stuff that doesn't appear to be working is working. So.
What do you do when you have a challenge? We had challenges this morning with our technology. But, welcome to the 21st century. I mean, I have a degree in this stuff, and I still have challenges with it. I guess that's with the technology always changing. But inside of your life, just everyday things. A lot of times, we're live here, and a lot of times people ask us, well, I've got this problem, and I believe, and I've learned from you, by the way, you are not your problem. But what do you do when you get to that point where you have a challenge, where you're just going, oh, what do I do?
Normally, there are challenges that every minister is experiencing all kinds of different kinds of challenges, economic challenges of keeping a church going. There's a lot of centers that have just, disbanded, and it's unfortunate. The way I explain that is that I didn't choose this profession; it chose me. Mm-hmm. That was the profound difference in deciding what I wanted to do, because I was a professional musician and a music teacher. And I was very good at what I did, but I was getting bored with it all. But meanwhile, I'm studying this philosophy, and I get into the last part before I became a minister. And I was up at the Kings Canyon. I was looking at those fantastic redwoods, and I was thinking, I was holding an acorn in my hand. I tell this story frequently, and this acorn had a little crown on it. And so I was looking at it, and I said, I've never really committed to doing something that would take me into a whole different concept of who I am. And at that moment, I decided to become a minister. I wasn't even planning on being a minister. And that's when it chose me. That's the way I say it. And I've been through every possible experience. Everybody looks for this steady growth. Mine went like this. And then we go up, and then we go down, and then we go sideways. And it goes in every different direction. But no matter where it's going, the thing I keep remembering about myself is that once I'm connected, I become the source of that love for my congregation and for the people in my life. And that's what I'm doing right now. I love the people in my life. I love my congregation. And I love who I am, and I love what I'm doing. And I have a constant different experience with it every day.
And how would you explain our philosophy to someone that doesn't know anything about it?
This is a pat answer. We used to be called religious science, if you recall. And religion is your relationship with God, and science is the study of that relationship. That's how I explain it to people. This is religion. It's your relationship with God and how we study that relationship. For what purpose? To keep growing it, to keep improving it, and to stay connected with this power that we have. Because the more we're connected, the more life becomes a really just joyful experience of unfoldment.
That's perfect.
Yeah. Well, I had a while to think about it.
How's your prayer changed over time? You went from a practitioner in our philosophy, and then I know you went through a couple of things with the practitioner, and then you decided to become a reverend. How has your prayer changed over the time that you've been doing prayer? And we're looking for the answer of, this is the aha moment. This is when it actually bore fruit for me.
Well, you learn prayer in 3 steps, 5 steps, and 7 steps. And a lot of people in Religious Science International that I grew up in, we taught the 7-step prayer, but in United, they didn't teach it very much. They didn't thought it was necessary. But the 7-step prayer is recognition, unification, declaration, and then it's dismantling whatever belief that you have and denying it power. You don't say it isn't there. You say, I dismiss the power from that belief. And then the next step is, here's what I believe. And that you shifted your mind. Then you give gratitude, and then you release. So those 2 points, I do that frequently because many times what I'm experiencing, if I'm experiencing any kind of conflict, it's because I have a conflict in my own mind. And so the way I change my mind is I say, well, there's no more power in that way of thinking. And this is what I teach people. Say, you may be a fact, but you're not the truth. That's what I say to that concept it's challenging my mind. It may be a fact, but it's not the truth. Say that together. But it's not the truth.
It's not the truth.
Let's try again. But it's
not the truth.
You got it.
So what does truth mean to you?
Truth? Truth is my connection with the infinite nature of existence and the constant unfoldment of that existence. Because you're not going to a place. You're becoming an expression of God. Not going to God, but becoming that wider expression. And then when you realize it's all infinite to begin with, there's no end to it, and there's no end to the possibilities of who you are as you unfold.
So we're always in a state of becoming.
Always. There's no other state to be. Unless you want to be going. Where are you going? I'm becoming. I'm not going anywhere. I'm just becoming.
We'll be going in a second.
Yeah.
What's your favorite Ernest Holmes book? And do not say The Science of Mind, because we already know that that's the top favorite.
No, that's not my favorite book. It's I had this as I get older. I have this thing I blank on names, but it's it'll come to me.
Let's name them up. This thing they call you.
Yeah, this thing called you. I'm sorry. Thank you very much. This thing called you. It's interesting as you get older. You just it just blanks on certain things, but I'm still managed to get up to speak in front of crowds and do pretty good. So
you do great. I'm here. I was there Sunday, so I could speak to that.
And what is it about the book that you like so much?
Oh, this thing called you is because it was like a Hallmark card written to your soul. That's the way I described the book. It's it's not a book. It's a Hallmark card. And you read Hallmark cards. Oh wow, I just love that. Oh, I love this idea. I love that. I love this. I love that. Happy birthday.
And the book is great because within the book there's prayers that Ernest Holmes writes as well.
Yeah, that's fast. That's fabulous. That's perhaps one of the things that makes the book so interesting is he actually prints out the prayer. But he never prayed out loud. Some people don't understand that, but he always prayed in silence. He just sat with the client, and he would sit there in silence for maybe a half hour, and then he'd say, "It's done."
That's
Cowabunga.
That's interesting. They say in the biblical reference, first there was the Word is with God. You in show number 8, Reverend Paul and I were talking about. He's saying that we should maybe voice the prayer out loud, but you're saying that Ernest Holmes spoke in a silent voice within himself, even though we know prayer comes from within, and then God works through us and for us. What are your thoughts on that? You just said that maybe for yourself we're looking at, you pray out loud, or do you pray within yourself a lot of times?
Let me see if I can tell you how I explained this. And when I was teaching, probably about halfway through my ministry, I had a really good answer to that question. What it is, and I can't remember this, is that the deeper you go, Emerson said that life is a running sea of circumstances, which most of the people are on the surface. And so as we go into the depth of our own being, we go to the place where we're all connected together. Mm-hmm. And when I'm thinking to myself, that's where I am when I'm praying for somebody else. I'm all connected together with you, my friend. And I speak the truth, and I know the truth. Now, if the person is receptive, to the degree they're receptive, they will demonstrate. But my job is not to make them receptive. My job is to know the truth for them. And then their own growth will open them up to receptivity, and they'll experience. Sometimes an answer to your prayer comes like 10 years down the road when you've gone through all this experience. Mm. So, I'm not saying that prayer doesn't get answered, because it does get answered immediately, but sometimes it takes you a while to grow into the demonstration. Mm. You gotta maturate emotionally, mentally, and maturate. Maturate is one of my favorite words. And that's what we're always in the process of doing, maturating. So, anyway.
When you do prayer, how do you not take on the energy of somebody else? That's something that I've heard in different philosophies, is that they do prayer for other people, and then they take on the energy themselves, so they're feeling the energy and stress of it. In your opinion, how does that work for you?
Well, first of all, there's no one right answer to prayer. Let's just acknowledge that other people have different ways of thinking about it. That doesn't mean that their way is illegitimate. Right. It means that they experience it differently. And I've met many people who call themselves, I don't call myself a healer. I call myself just a minister who's knowing the truth for you. The healing takes place within you, but I just acknowledge the truth. Now, how do I acknowledge the blocks that people put up? That's when I give the 7-step prayer. There is no power in that belief of not being receptive to the love that you seek. I know the power is in being receptive to that love, and I know that love is right there now. So when people come to me like, your prayer for a job, I always tell them the job is looking for you. Just make yourself available. The relationship is looking for you. Make yourself available. And that's when they grow into something different. And then they'll say, watch every Jim, out of the blue. It just happened.
Bam, amen, right? Paul, go ahead and ask the next question.
Happens out of the blue, you just showed up, and that's it.
That's right. That's right. And you brought waffles.
So when you're praying, when you're doing a spiritual mind treatment, when is that point that you release it into the law?
At the end.
But what's that feel like for you when you're set, everything's done, and then you release it? How does that feel for you?
It feels great, but I feel great all the way through the prayer, because prayer is just one experience of the oneness of life. And the first thing you have to do is recognize that, and then you're in that, and then you unify with it. And then as you unify with it and you start to declare it's the truth, and then if you say there is no power in this way of believing, the power is in this way of believing, and therefore I give thanks and gratitude. So the whole prayer is one of acceptance. And the feeling is a word that we don't often use in this philosophy. It's the feeling of grace. There's no feeling of like, yay! That's not it. But there's grace. And, and grace can be fierce sometimes.
What's your favorite Ernest Holmes quote, Dr. Jim?
Oh, this will be good.
Oh, yeah.
That's a good question, because it keeps...
Besides Rule 52.
Well, 52 is my favorite. I guess you could say that. Paul, are you familiar with Rule 52?
Yeah, Rich brings it up all the time, so I have to know it.
Well, that's one of my favorite, because it's true. God, you're going to get what you believe. And that's really what Rule 52 says. You're getting what you believe. So why would you want to change that? Then you have to believe something different. And you say, but how can I believe something different as long as I'm still stuck in this feeling? Well, you've got to release the feeling and build the relationship with God, because God isn't feeling that, but he's demonstrating it for you because it's done it to you as you believe. That's why I said every prayer is the belief. I mean, prayer is the natural way of existence. And that's why I said when people say, I don't want to be lonely, skip the don't. Don't ever use that word, don't again. Say, I seek to be connected and loved. And when you say, I'm tired of being lonely, well, then you're tired of lonely. It's just the way you think. That's all.
We're actually at the 4-minute mark right now. One of the things that a lot of our listeners are looking for is how do you start your day out with prayer? How do you do it? I mean, we've talked in our show how we do it.
Well, this might be different for you, but I'm married to a beautiful person, and I love her. And I wake up every morning, I go over it, and I'm just thankful first for her and her presence in my life. And just being thankful for the presence of people is the beginning of how I start my day. And that's the way that I start my day. And I keep going through and it's the presence. And this last Sunday, I talked about presence versus pressure. And what's pressure? It's when you don't feel loving and you don't feel loved. But when you feel loved, then you can't help but be loving. That's the way I look at it.
Is there any takeaway that you want our audience to know before we close?
Takeaway. Well, your life is just going to constantly get better. And as it gets better, you're going to grow into something that you never knew you were, which is an expression of a life that you've been given to live. But as you learn that you've been given this gift, you'll then have the pleasure of receiving the gift, which is enjoying your life. And that's what's table.
So let's go through this real quick. Our guest, Reverend Jim, can be found at ocspiritualcenter.com. And his videos are there for years and years on Vimeo and on...
on drjimturrell.substack.com. Now, I want you to know, if you're a minister and you're watching the show, I publish my notes every week on my talks. So you can, if one thing I noticed about ministers is they're about 5 or 6 or 7 years into this ministry business, and they kind of run out of things to say. And when you're just 2 or 3 years into it, you think, was that possible? And yeah. And I've known ministers that just get bored because, I had to keep saying the same thing over and over again. So that's when I tell them, but your life is constantly changing. And so that's when I start to tell you, go back. And this is when I also teach people how to write books. And I said, you need stories. And the only way you can tell stories, you go back and look at every 10-year sequence of your life and what happened to you, what was important. And then you write that down. And pretty soon you got a collection of stories to tell. And then as you get old, like I am, like I'm getting ready to turn 79 next month. The amazing thing is that I've got lots of stories to tell, and I tell them, but I'm very careful about don't tell that story again until next year. So there's lots of stories to tell, and I love my story. I love my stories, and I've got some great ones too. You've got great stories, but maybe you're not noting them, because that's when demonstrations happen, and that's when you grow. And I got great stories to tell. I just love. Well, you have that. I told a few on Sunday, and then I Sunday through that I also told a couple of stories that made me go verklempt for a little bit. I'm not allowed to I'm not afraid to let my feelings take over, because I call that God's punctuation. I reach a point where you can't talk anymore. So for just a moment or two, you are obviously engrossed in the feeling of whatever you're talking about. And you know what's interesting about that is that's when your audience is learning more from what your silence is telling them than what your words are telling them. So,
well, I can tell you
verklempt.
Your Speaking Without Notes book is invaluable for me. I've taken his class 3 times, and I just love it. It's
called Public Speaking from the Heart.
See?
And it isn't without notes. it's speaking from your heart, learning what the heart wants to say,
Mm.
because the heart's connected to life in a different way than you are mentally or intellectually. And there's cause, mentality, and effect. That's one of the three words that I keep telling people. And your mentality is your egocentric nature or your intuitive nature. And this is where you're either willful and demanding or willing and receptive. That's what you're willing and receptive, or you're willful and demanding. And being willful and demanding is not going to make you happy. But be willing and receptive, that's going to make you happier than ever before.
Awesome. We're at the close of the show. Reverend Paul, what's your site?
IamSpiritAlive.com.
And we are prayersradio.com. And Reverend Jim, would you like to pray us out today?
Sure, absolutely. Here's what I know. The divine nature of existence is a constant expansion of love. And that love is constantly energizing life. So I acknowledge that love and my life as one in unity of being. And I declare for myself and for everyone who's listening to this that there is this oneness that's already connected to you. And because you're a part of it, it wants to open up and give you the kingdom, because you are the kingdom. You are the life that was always destined and is always being expressed in love. A love that you have yet to experience, but soon you will, and it'll just keep growing and growing and growing. And so I say thank you, God, for that truth. Thank you for the love that you are, for the love that I am, for the love that every person is listening to this word, because that love not only solves problems, it creates the new life to be ready to be lived. And as I release this word with gratitude, the word is done, and so it is. Amen.
And so
it is.
Cowabunga.
Cowabunga. Thank you, Jim, for being on our show. And I'm Reverend Rich. This is Reverend Paul. And we wish you a great day. And we'll see you next week.
Thank you for letting me be here. And Paul, thank you. Good
to finally meet you.
Yep.
And we'll put a PDF link to the thing called You in the.
We'll put a link to the book online and stuff. I'll take care of that and put it in the show notes for everybody.
I didn't mention Jesus Under the Hood is my latest book.
Yeah,
I'm a great student of Jesus, and I know we're ending the show, but Jesus Under the Hood, go to Amazon.com and buy that book, because you won't be sorry, because it's like an episode on Cheers.
Yeah, I'll put it in the show notes, a link for Amazon, so that you can get Jim's latest book, which is awesome.
Well, I love to see the picture of Jesus. He's under the hood. Don't bother him. He's going to where the real problem exists in your engine. And every problem you have with your car is a metaphor for what you're going to have. The exhaust system, the spark plugs, everything is a metaphor. That's what's a lot of fun. And he takes James, John, and Peter, his three disciples who went to Gethsemane with him, down with him to be a mechanic. They're all being mechanics. And they say, why are we being a mechanic? And Jesus says, well, because teaching in the temple doesn't mean anything, but when you're one-on-one with people, that's when you really begin to deliver the word. So
it's a good read.
Yeah, it is a good read. A lot of fun.
And so it is.
Oh, it's nice to meet you.
And so it is. Say goodbye, everybody.